Gemma McCluskie, born on February 5, 1983, was a figure whose face was familiar to millions across Britain, primarily through her acting career. She became widely recognized for her role as Carrie Skinner in the long-running British soap opera EastEnders, a character she portrayed with memorable impact between the years 2000 and 2001. Her time on the show brought her into the public eye, establishing her as a budding talent in the entertainment industry. Following her tenure on EastEnders, Gemma continued to pursue various acting projects and maintain connections within the vibrant London art scene, carving out a life that revolved around creativity and performance. By the early part of 2012, Gemma had settled into a comfortable routine, residing in a private flat located in the bustling Hackney area of East London. This dwelling was not her solitary abode. She shared the living space with her older brother, Tony McCluskie. Their shared residence in the heart of the city was a long-standing arrangement, forming a central part of their intertwined daily lives. The routine existence within their shared Hackney flat was irrevocably shattered on the evening of March 1st, 2012, when Gemma McCluskie abruptly and without any warning vanished. Her disappearance was sudden and left no immediate trace, no note, no message, only an unsettling void where her presence had been. Her family and close circle of friends, accustomed to her regular communications and predictable movements, quickly grew concerned when she failed to respond to calls or appear for scheduled engagements. As the initial hours of her absence stretched into a full day, then into a second, the alarm escalated significantly, prompting them to formally report her as a missing person to the London Metropolitan Police. The immediate police response initiated a standard protocol for missing individuals, focusing on establishing her last known whereabouts and attempting to contact anyone who might have seen or spoken to her recently. The initial phase of the investigation centered heavily on meticulously tracing Gemma's final confirmed movements. Detectives scoured surveillance footage from businesses and public cameras in the vicinity of her Hackney flat. Their persistence yielded a critical piece of information. CCTV footage captured Gemma entering a local kebab shop on the evening of her disappearance, specifically at approximately 8 p.m. This time-stamped visual record became the final confirmed sighting of Gemma McCluskie. The footage showed her making a purchase and then exiting the establishment, seemingly without incident. While providing a precise time and location, this isolated visual record offered no further insight into her subsequent actions or where she might have gone next. It merely solidified the last moment her life was definitively witnessed before she effectively disappeared from all public and private records, becoming a haunting question mark in the bustling urban landscape. As news of Gemma's unexplained disappearance began to circulate, particularly within the close-knit communities of East London and the wider British entertainment industry, the response from her friends, former colleagues, and devoted fans was one of profound concern and swift action. Recognizing the urgency of the situation and the critical need for immediate search efforts, a large-scale search party was quickly organized. This collective endeavor saw approximately 100 individuals, including many familiar faces from the entertainment world, along with local volunteers and concerned residents, converging in East London. They systematically fanned out across the area, dedicating their time and energy to a painstaking ground search. They distributed countless flyers bearing Gemma's image and details, appealed for any information from the public, and meticulously combed through local parks, streets, and various public spaces, hoping to find any trace, any clue, or any sign of the missing actress. Despite this widespread and dedicated effort, the extensive search yielded no immediate breakthroughs. The mystery surrounding Gemma McCluskie's abrupt and baffling disappearance deepened with each passing hour, leaving a growing void of unanswered questions for those who cared for her and for the increasingly concerned public who had followed her career. Her absence became a chilling void, a puzzle with no immediate solutions, setting the stage for a far more sinister unfolding of events. The extensive ground search for Gemma McCluskie by volunteers and law enforcement continued for several days following her disappearance, stretching across the varied landscapes of East London. Despite the widespread public appeals and the dedicated efforts of approximately 100 individuals combing through parks, streets, and residential areas, no concrete leads emerged. Her vanishing remained a profoundly unsettling enigma, a disturbing gap in the known fabric of her existence, leaving her family and the police grappling with an absence that defied immediate explanation. However, The nature of the mystery surrounding Gemma took a profoundly grim and unexpected turn on the morning of March 6, 2012, just 5 days after she was last definitively seen. That morning, the quiet routine along Regent's Canal in East London was shattered by a horrific discovery made by a barge operator. As the barge navigated a particularly serene stretch of the waterway, the operator spotted an object floating in the murky brown water, a large, dark suitcase, distinctly out of place amidst the natural debris. Driven by curiosity and a sense of unease, the operator maneuvered the barge closer and attempted to retrieve the submerged luggage. In a chilling moment, as the operator pulled the suitcase toward the vessel, it unexpectedly opened. The contents were instantly revealed, a sight of unimaginable horror. Inside lay the torso of a human body. The shock of the discovery was immediate and absolute. The horrifying find instantly triggered a massive and urgent response from the Metropolitan Police. Sirens pierced the morning quiet as detectives, uniformed officers, and specialized forensic teams converged rapidly on the canal bank. The area surrounding the discovery was immediately cordoned off, a wide perimeter established to prevent any contamination or disturbance of potential evidence. Forensic experts, working with meticulous care and precision, initiated a painstaking recovery operation, treating the canal itself and its immediate banks as a complex crime scene. The retrieved torso was shocking not only in its human origin, but in profound incompleteness. It lacked a head, both arms, and both legs. This macabre state clearly indicated a deliberate and brutal act of dismemberment, signaling a level of depravity that intensified the already grave nature of the discovery. This chilling find immediately transformed what had been a missing persons inquiry into a full-scale homicide investigation, propelling the case into an entirely new and far more sinister dimension, demanding answers to an unspeakable act of violence. The investigation scope broadened dramatically, shifting from merely locating a missing individual to identifying a victim and, critically, to hunting down a perpetrator capable of such a horrific act. The initial forensic examination of the recovered torso provided crucial details that allowed for rapid progress in identification. It was confirmed as belonging to a female, and preliminary analysis suggested a young adult. The immediate priority for investigators became formal identification, a process that involved cross-referencing unique physical characteristics, any distinguishing marks, and, most importantly, dental records with recent missing persons reports. Within hours, the devastating and official confirmation arrived. The torso definitively belonged to Gemma McCluskie. The news sent profound shockwaves, not only through her distraught family and her former colleagues in the entertainment industry, but also across the entire nation, which had been following her disappearance with increasing concern. The confirmation of her murder intensified the police investigations focused dramatically. The immediate priority shifted to an intensive and relentless hunt for the remaining body parts, and, perhaps most critically, for the individual or individuals responsible for such an egregious act of violence and desecration. Specialized diving teams were immediately deployed into the murky depths of Regent's Canal, systematically searching its extensive network. Police patrols were significantly intensified along the canal banks, in surrounding waterways, and through adjacent green spaces, meticulously looking for anything suspicious that might lead to further discoveries. The grim search was relentless, driven by the urgency of completing the victim's remains and gathering more evidence. In the weeks that followed the initial discovery, these painstaking and widespread search efforts began to yield further, equally distressing and critical findings. Driven by advanced forensic analysis of the canal's water currents, the precise mapping of canal routes, and intelligence gathered from witness accounts, investigators successfully located additional sections of human remains. On March 14th, approximately a week after the torso was found, Gemma's arms were retrieved from a different section of the canal. This was followed swiftly by the discovery of her legs on March 17th. Each subsequent find deepened the horror of the crime, confirming the perpetrator's deliberate, systematic, and cold-blooded actions to dismember and conceal the body across the waterway. However, one crucial anatomical piece remained stubbornly missing: Gemma's head. This prolonged absence posed a significant challenge for forensic pathologists attempting to definitively determine the precise cause of death and other vital details about the brutal assault. The The search for her head continued for many months, a grim and persistent undertaking that kept the horrific nature of the case prominently in the public consciousness. It was not until September 10, 2012, more than half a year after the initial discovery of her torso, that Gemma's head was finally located. It was found floating in the very same canal system, approximately 5 miles from where her torso had initially been discovered, further cementing the chilling precision and premeditation involved in the disposal of her remains. As the forensic evidence accumulated, revealing the full extent and horrific nature of the dismemberment, the police investigation quickly began to narrow its focus onto individuals closest to Gemma. The specific timeline of her disappearance, her last known movements, and, crucially, the intricate dynamics within her shared home became critical areas of intense scrutiny. Early in the investigation, detectives turned their attention to her living situation, specifically focusing on her flatmate and older brother, Tony McCluskie. While Tony initially presented as cooperative and seemingly concerned about his sister's disappearance, inconsistencies in his initial statements to police and subtle anomalies in his behavior began to attract the keen attention of seasoned detectives specializing in violent crime. The methodical gathering of evidence, which included analyzing phone records, reviewing bank transactions, conducting discreet surveillance, and systematically re-interviewing individuals who had interacted with both Gemma and Tony around the time of the disappearance, began to build a circumstantial, yet increasingly compelling, picture. This detailed aggregation of information led to a critical turning point in the inquiry. On March 10, 2012, just 4 days after the initial, shocking discovery of Gemma's torso in the canal, and while the painstaking search for her remaining body parts was still tragically underway, Tony McCluskie was formally arrested. Following further intensive questioning at a police station and the aggregation of preliminary evidence linking him directly to the immediate aftermath of Gemma's disappearance, he was subsequently charged with Gemma's murder. The charge against her own brother sent a profound shockwave of disbelief and horror across the entire nation, transforming what was already a grim murder inquiry into an unspeakably disturbing narrative of familial betrayal, extreme violence, and unimaginable depravity. The unprecedented complexity of the case, involving a high-profile victim and a shocking familial accusation, ensured that it would attract intense and sustained public and media scrutiny as the investigation progressed relentlessly toward a full legal resolution, laying bare the darkest corners of a domestic tragedy. With Tony McCluskie formally charged with the murder of his sister Gemma, the investigation shifted from the grisly discovery and identification of remains to the meticulous reconstruction of the crime itself. Detectives and prosecutors embarked on the arduous task of piecing together the events that unfolded within the confines of their shared Hackney flat, aiming to establish a clear narrative of the final moments of Gemma's life and the horrific aftermath. This phase of the inquiry relied heavily on forensic analysis of the flat, witness statements revisited for new insights, and an increasingly detailed timeline of both Gemma's and Tony's movements leading up to, during, and immediately following her disappearance. The central focus became understanding the catalyst that led to such extreme violence within a seemingly normal sibling relationship. The prosecution's detailed reconstruction of the events leading to Gemma's death began with what appeared to be a mundane domestic dispute, a common occurrence in many shared living spaces, yet one that escalated with tragic and fatal consequences. According to the evidence meticulously compiled by investigators, the siblings had engaged in a particularly heated argument at their Hackney flat on the evening of March 1st, 2012, shortly after Gemma's last confirmed sighting at the kebab shop. The specific point of contention that night was reportedly an overflowing bath. This seemingly minor incident, a domestic oversight, became the flashpoint for a deeper underlying tension. Testimony and evidence suggested that the dispute quickly spiraled, culminating in Gemma delivering an ultimatum to her older brother, Tony. She informed him that he needed to move out of the flat. This instruction, given during the height of the argument, appeared to be the immediate trigger that pushed the simmering conflict into a realm of uncontrollable rage. The nature of this final argument underscored the breakdown in their cohabitation, a dynamic that would soon prove fatal. Prosecutors meticulously detailed the brutal escalation of the conflict. They alleged that following Gemma's instruction for him to leave, Tony McCluskie launched a ferocious and sustained assault on his sister. Evidence presented indicated that he struck Gemma multiple times over the head with a blunt object, The precise nature of this weapon was a critical element of the forensic investigation, with analysis of the impact trauma on Gemma's skull pointing toward a heavy, non-edged instrument. The ferocity and repetition of the blows suggested an act driven by extreme anger and a complete loss of control. The immediate aftermath of this violent assault was equally chilling. Prosecutors contended that, following the fatal blows, Toni McCluskie then spent hours dismembering her body. This was not a quick or impulsive act, but methodical, protracted process that required considerable effort and a chilling detachment. Forensic evidence from the flat, though meticulously cleaned by the perpetrator, indicated areas where such an act would have taken place. The sheer scale and cold precision of the dismemberment painted a picture of a perpetrator attempting to meticulously conceal the identity of the victim and facilitate the disposal of her remains, reflecting a calculated effort to evade detection. The systematic nature of this act profoundly shocked investigators and the public, revealing a horrifying level of post-mortem desecration, a significant element introduced by the defense during the subsequent legal proceedings. Offering insight into Toni McCluskie's state of mind was his admitted heavy cannabis use. Specifically, Toni was described as a habitual user of skunk, a particularly potent strain of cannabis. Following his arrest and during subsequent police interviews, Toni McCluskie claimed a subsequent and profound memory loss regarding the events of that night. He stated he could not recall the specifics of the fatal altercation or the gruesome acts that followed, attributing this amnesia directly to his drug use. This claim was a central pillar of his defense, attempting to mitigate his culpability by arguing a diminished mental state. Furthermore, Toni McCluskie attempted to shift the degree of responsibility for the fatal encounter by claiming that Gemma had attacked him first. He alleged that the physical altercation began with her initiating violence, and that his actions were a defensive response, albeit one that spiraled tragically out of control. This assertion aimed to reframe the narrative from one of unprovoked aggression to a reactive, self-preservatory act, attempting to explain the extreme violence as a consequence of a struggle rather than a deliberate, murderous assault. The validity of this claim, however, was heavily scrutinized by both the prosecution and the court, given the nature of Gemma's injuries and the methodical dismemberment that followed, which suggested a level of planning and intent inconsistent with a purely defensive, unremembered reaction. The interplay between the alleged drug-induced amnesia, the claim of initial provocation, and the stark physical evidence of the crime became critical points of contention in the unfolding legal drama, attempting to explain the inexplicable savagery of the act. Following the unspeakable violence that unfolded within the confines of the Hackney flat, with Gemma McCluskie brutally murdered and then meticulously dismembered, the perpetrator, Toni McCluskie, immediately embarked on a chilling and elaborate cover-up operation. His primary objective was to eliminate any trace of his horrific crime and to create a convoluted narrative that would deflect suspicion away from himself. This phase of the crime was characterized by a chilling blend of calculated deceit and audacious attempts to mislead both Gemma's worried friends and family, and crucially the police. The very next day, in the early hours of March 2nd, 2012, while Gemma's remains were still being concealed, Toni McCluskie reportedly made calls to Gemma's close friends and acquaintances, feigning concern about her sudden and unexpected disappearance. His tone was described as one of worry, inquiring if they had heard from her or knew of her whereabouts, meticulously constructing an illusion of a distressed brother. This initial act of deception was a foundational step in his elaborate strategy to distance himself from the grim reality of what had occurred within their shared home. Crucially, it was Toni McCluskie himself who formally reported Gemma missing to the police. This action, seemingly that of a concerned sibling, was in fact a deliberate and highly deceptive maneuver designed to establish an alibi and to control the initial direction of the police inquiry. When interacting with law enforcement, Toni went to great lengths to provide misleading information, attempting to steer their investigation away from himself and towards entirely innocent parties. A significant part of his deceptive strategy involved citing a former boyfriend of Gemma's as suspicious. He provided the police with details about this individual, fabricating or exaggerating past conflicts or suggesting that this ex-partner might have a motive for harming Gemma. This calculated misdirection was an attempt to waste valuable police resources on a false lead, buying himself critical time to dispose of Gemma's remains and further consolidate his fabricated story. His actions were not those of an innocent man. They were the precise maneuvers of an individual orchestrating a complex deception to escape the consequences of a heinous crime, aiming to paint a picture of a distraught brother while actively participating in the obliteration of evidence. The meticulous nature of this early deception underscored the chilling premeditation involved in the cover-up, revealing a cold and calculating mind at work. However, despite Tony McCluskie's elaborate attempts at concealment and misdirection, the persistent and methodical work of police investigators began to unravel his fabricated narrative. A critical breakthrough came from the diligent review of CCTV evidence gathered from the Hackney area. Investigators, initially looking for any sign of Gemma, began to focus on the movements of her brother, Tony, especially in the hours and days immediately following Gemma's disappearance. Their exhaustive review of extensive surveillance footage yielded a crucial and damning visual record. This footage, time-stamped and precisely geolocated, captured Tony McCluskie on the evening of March 2nd, 2012, just hours after his sister was murdered and dismembered outside their Hackney flat. The grainy, but clear, images showed him dragging a large, heavy suitcase out of the building and into a waiting taxi. The sheer effort Tony exerted in pulling the suitcase, its noticeable weight indicated by a strained posture, immediately raised suspicions. The size and shape of the luggage were also consistent with the type of container that would later be discovered in the Canal. This CCTV footage served as irrefutable evidence of body disposal. The sequence of events captured on camera contradicted Tony McCluskie's narrative of innocent concern and his claims of not knowing Gemma's whereabouts. Instead, it powerfully suggested direct involvement in the clandestine removal of evidence from the crime scene. Detectives noted the time of the taxi journey, allowing them to trace its route and approximate destination. This crucial visual evidence provided a tangible link between Tony and the subsequent discovery of Gemma's dismembered torso in Regent's Canal. The taxi journey itself became a key investigative thread, leading police to interview the taxi driver, who recounted picking up Tony McCluskie and the heavy luggage, though the driver, unaware of the horrific contents, did not initially recall anything overtly suspicious about the passenger. However, when presented with the fact of the case, his recollection provided further corroboration of Tony's movements. The discovery of the CCTV footage dramatically narrowed the focus on Tony as the primary suspect, shifting him from a concerned brother to the undeniable center of the murder investigation. It laid bare his deception and provided the crucial visual proof that he had not only committed the murder, but had also actively participated in the grotesque act of disposing of his sister's remains in an attempt to escape justice. The meticulous planning and execution of this disposal, as revealed by the surveillance footage, painted a chilling portrait of a perpetrator determined to erase all traces of his crime, underscoring the cold-blooded nature of his actions. The footage became a centerpiece of the prosecution's case, an unyielding visual testament to his guilt. With Tony McCluskie formally charged and the extensive body of evidence meticulously compiled by the Metropolitan Police's Special Investigations Unit, the case of Gemma McCluskie's murder moved into its critical legal phase, the trial. The proceedings began on January 14, 2013 at the Venerable Old Bailey, London Central Criminal Court, a venue steeped in centuries of legal history. The trial commenced with immense public and media interest, a direct reflection of Gemma's public profile as a former television actress and the shocking nature of the charges against her own brother. The prosecution, led by seasoned Crown barristers, immediately began the arduous task of presenting their comprehensive case to the jury. Their strategy was to construct an undeniable narrative of the events that transpired within the Hackney flat, meticulously detailing the last hours of Gemma's life and the horrific aftermath at the hands of her sibling. This involved the systematic presentation of every piece of forensic evidence, every witness statement, and every piece of digital and visual corroboration gathered over preceding months. The courtroom became a stage where the grim details of the crime were laid bare, revealing the full extent of the tragedy. The prosecution's opening statements and subsequent presentations were built upon a foundation of chilling detail, outlining the sequence of events with painstaking precision. They meticulously detailed the underlying abuse Gemma had reportedly suffered at the hands of her brother, Tony, in the period leading up to her death. While not directly a part of the fatal incident, this context was presented to establish a pattern of volatile behavior and the deteriorating dynamic within their shared living space. The court heard how the simmering tensions between the siblings culminated in a heated bathroom fight on the evening of March 1st, 2012, just hours after Gemma's final confirmed sighting. Prosecutors alleged that the seemingly trivial domestic dispute, sparked by an overflowing bath, escalated rapidly when Gemma, frustrated and exasperated, demanded that Tony move out of their shared flat. This ultimatum, they contended, acted as a definitive trigger for Tony's explosive rage. The court was then presented with the stark and brutal reality of the lethal strikes. Forensic pathologists provided expert testimony, detailing the multiple, forceful blows Gemma sustained her head with a blunt object, confirming that these impacts were the cause of death. The evidence strongly suggested a ferocious and sustained assault, reflecting an extreme loss of control on Tony's part. However, the most disturbing aspect of the prosecution's narrative centered on the systematic and cold-blooded dismemberment of Gemma's body. Prosecutors alleged that following the fatal assault, Tony McCluskie spent hours within the flat performing this horrific act. They presented forensic findings that indicated areas of the flat had been meticulously cleaned to remove blood and tissue evidence, suggesting a calculated effort to conceal the crime. The act of dismemberment was portrayed not as a frenzied, impulsive act, but as a deliberate and painstaking process, undertaken with chilling precision to facilitate the disposal of her remains across London's Canal system. The expert testimony, combined with the visual evidence of the recovered body parts, served to underscore the extreme nature of the violence and the chilling efforts at concealment that followed. During the trial, Tony McCluskie's defense did not outright deny his involvement in Gemma's death, but instead sought to mitigate the charge from murder to manslaughter. Facing overwhelming evidence, Tony made a formal admission of manslaughter, a legal acknowledgement that he caused Gemma's death, but with the crucial caveat that he lacked the intent to kill or cause grievous bodily harm. His defense centered on the argument that he had experienced a loss of control during the heated argument with Gemma, claiming that her demand for him to move out, combined with his long-standing heavy use of potent cannabis, specifically skunk, had pushed him over the edge, leading to an impulsive and uncontrolled violent outburst. He maintained that he could not fully recall the details of the fatal altercation due to a subsequent drug-induced memory loss, and further asserted that Gemma had attacked him first, pushing him into a defensive reaction that tragically spiraled. This argument aimed to paint a picture of a man driven by sudden, overwhelming rage, rather than a calculated, murderous intent. However, the prosecution vigorously challenged his defense, contending that the methodical dismemberment and subsequent elaborate cover-up, including the deceptive missing person report and the careful disposal of the body parts, demonstrated a clear level of planning and rationality inconsistent with a spontaneous loss of control or an amnesia-induced state. They argued that these actions, occurring hours after the alleged loss of control, pointed directly to a deliberate intent to kill and then conceal the crime, making the charge of murder entirely appropriate. The jury, having absorbed weeks of intense and often disturbing testimony, retired to deliberate the complex facts and legal arguments presented. Their task was to weigh the evidence carefully, considering the prosecution's compelling case for murder against the defense's argument for manslaughter based on loss of control and diminished responsibility. The deliberation period was rigorous, reflecting the gravity of the charges and the intricate details they had to reconcile. After an extended period of careful consideration, the jury returned to the Old Bailey courtroom to deliver their verdict. On January 30th, 2013, after the foreman rose to address the court, the verdict was read. The jury found Tony McCluskie guilty of murder, a decision reached by an 11-1 majority. This conviction, arrived at after a thorough examination of all the evidence, unequivocally rejected the defense's claims of manslaughter and solidified the prosecution's argument that Tony McCluskie had indeed intended to kill Gemma or cause her serious harm. The verdict brought a decisive end to legal proceedings and formally assigned culpability for Gemma's tragic death. Following the guilty verdict, the court proceeded to the sentencing phase. The judge, in delivering the sentence, emphasized the heinous nature of the crime, the brutality of the assault, and the abhorrent act of dismemberment and disposal. The court also took into account the profound impact of the crime on Gemma's family, whose lives have been irrevocably shattered by her loss, and the shocking revelation of her brother's culpability. Considering the severity of the offense and the aggravating factors present, Tony McCluskie, receive a life imprisonment sentence. Furthermore, the judge stipulated a minimum term of 20 years that he would have to serve before even being considered for parole. This minimum term underscored the court's assessment of the gravity of his actions, ensuring that he would remain incarcerated for a substantial period, a direct consequence of his unimaginable violence against his own sister. The sentence delivered a final measure of justice in a case that had captivated and horrified the nation, providing a definitive legal outcome to a tragedy rooted in domestic conflict and extreme violence. The halls of the Old Bailey, witness to countless historic judgments, now added the grim but resolute conclusion of Gemma McCluskie's case to its long annals. The conviction of Tony McCluskie for the murder of his sister, Gemma, and his subsequent sentence of life imprisonment resonated far beyond the confines of the Old Bailey courtroom. This deeply tragic case left an indelible mark on the public consciousness, forcing a somber reflection on the insidious nature of familial violence and the devastating consequences that can arise from domestic conflict. The narrative of Gemma McCluskie, a successful actress with a promising career and a vibrant life, brutally murdered by her own brother in their shared home, became a chilling testament to how quickly trust and kinship can be shattered by rage and addiction. The sheer horror of the dismemberment and the subsequent callous attempts at concealment amplified the shock, prompting widespread discussion about the hidden dangers that can exist within seemingly ordinary family units. The case underscored that violence does not always occur in dark alleys or by unknown assailants. Sometimes, the most profound betrayals occur within the very walls meant to offer sanctuary, at the hands of those presumed to offer protection and care. This particular element of the case, the murder of a sibling by a sibling, added an especially grim dimension, making it a difficult and unsettling story for many to process. The public grappled with understanding how such extreme brutality could manifest within a family, leading to extensive commentary on the breakdown of relationships and the dark potential of unresolved conflicts. The immense public impact of Gemma McCluskie's case ensured its lasting presence in the discourse surrounding true crime. Its harrowing details and the shocking familial connection propelled it into the spotlight, making it a subject of extensive media coverage both during and after the trial. The story's compelling yet disturbing elements made it a prime candidate for various high-profile true crime series, reaching an even wider audience and solidifying its place as a significant case study in criminal psychology and investigation. It was prominently featured in the 2017 documentary series Crimes That Shook Britain, a program dedicated to exploring major criminal events that had a profound impact on the UK. This inclusion ensured that the intricacies of the investigation, the chilling details of the crime, and the methodical pursuit of justice were revisited and analyzed for new generations of viewers, maintaining the case's relevance. Furthermore, the case was also a central focus of Evidence of Evil, appearing as a dedicated episode within its first season, specifically Episode 9. These major television productions dissected the forensic evidence, reviewed the police investigation, and delved into the courtroom drama, offering detailed insights into how the crime was committed, how the perpetrator attempted to evade capture, and ultimately, how justice was served. Such widespread broadcast exposure ensured that Gemma McCluskie's story remained a potent reminder of the dark potential of human behavior, cementing its place in the annals of notable British true crime, and serving as a chilling cautionary tale that continues to resonate years after its resolution. Beyond the immediate shock and the enduring public fascination, Gemma McCluskie's murder provided crucial final context for broader societal discussions, specifically highlighting the insidious dangers of familial conflict, the destructive power of substance use, and the pervasive threat of domestic violence. The trial revealed that the catalyst of the fatal confrontation was a seemingly minor argument about an overflowing bath, which escalated into a demand for Tony to leave the shared flat. This seemingly trivial dispute exposed deeper, unresolved familial conflict and resentments that had likely festered between the siblings over time. The case served as a stark reminder that prolonged tension and unaddressed grievances within a household can sometimes erupt into unimaginable violence, transforming safe spaces into scenes of tragedy. It drew attention to the need for greater awareness of interfamilial disputes and their potential for escalating beyond control, emphasizing that domestic tranquility can often mask severe underlying issues. Furthermore, Tony McCluskie's admitted heavy cannabis use, particularly of the potent skunk variety, became a significant contextual factor in the legal proceedings. While his defense attempted to attribute his alleged memory loss and claim of initial provocation to his drug use, the prosecution argued that his actions following the murder, the methodical dismemberment, and the elaborate cover-up demonstrated a level of cognitive function and planning inconsistent with a completely drug-induced, unrecalled state. Nevertheless, the case undeniably contributed to public discourse around the correlation between substance abuse and heightened aggression or impaired judgment, showcasing how addiction can erode self-control and lead to devastating outcomes. It highlighted the complex interplay between drug dependency, mental state, and violent behavior, adding another layer of complexity to the understanding of the perpetrator's mindset. Most significantly, Gemma's tragic death served as a horrifying illustration of the brutality of domestic violence. This was not violence perpetrated by a stranger, but by an individual with whom Gemma shared a home and a lifelong bond. The systematic nature of the crime, from the initial fatal blows to the methodical dismemberment and disposal, underscored a terrifying level of control and cruelty. The case served as a stark warning about the pervasive nature of violence within the home, challenging perception that domestic environments are inherently safe. It amplified the critical message that victims of domestic abuse, regardless of their public profile or perceived strength, can face unimaginable dangers from those closest to them. The public outcry and extensive media coverage surrounding the case served to raise awareness about the warning signs of escalating domestic tensions and the devastating consequences when such issues are not addressed. The memory of Gemma McCluskie, a bright talent whose life was cruelly taken within her own home, continues to serve as a powerful and somber reminder of the vulnerabilities within family structures and the critical importance of recognizing and confronting the often hidden realities of familial conflict, substance abuse, and domestic violence. Her story, though painful, stands as a testament to the enduring pursuit of justice and the crucial lessons that can be gleaned from such profound tragedies, urging greater vigilance and understanding in the face of such profound violence. The finality of the Old Bailey's judgment brought an end to the legal battle, but the resonant legacy of Gemma McCluskie's case continues to echo, a permanent fixture in the nation's consciousness.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more.